The spirit of innovation is deeply ingrained in America, and Google is helping Americans innovate in ways both big and small. The Department of Defense is working with Google to help secure America's digital defense systems, from establishing cloud-based zero-trust solutions to deploying the latest AI technology. This is a new era of American innovation. Find out more at g.co/American innovation.
At Sierra, discover top workout gear at incredible prices, which might lead to another discovery. Your headphones haven't been connected this whole time. Awkward. Discover top brands at unexpectedly low prices. Sierra, let's get moving.
It is Monday, April 7th, 2025. Welcome back to Hang Up and Listen, the sports podcast here at Slate. Back with you once again, I am Alex Kirshner. I'm a contributing writer for Slate, and I also co-host the college football podcast Split Zone Duo. This week, we are going to talk about the Connecticut Huskies returning to the mountaintop in women's college basketball. We are going to talk about a real comeback in a sport that was critical to all of our childhoods, especially in the video gaming world, that is vertical skateboarding. We've got a great guest to talk about some major developments in that sport. And we are going to talk once again about a tradition unlike any other, Rory McIlroy's efforts to finally get the green jacket on his back and the monkey off his back at Augusta National Golf Club. But it was a big weekend. There was the men's Final Four semifinal games in San Antonio at the Alamo Dome. The championship game between Duke and Houston is too late to make this week's episode of Hang Up and Listen. But Lindsay Gibbs, you are the publisher of Power Plays and you're a North Carolina Tar Heels fan. I bet you enjoyed what you saw on Saturday night.
Yes. Listen, the games here in Tampa have not been super compelling, but goodness was that Duke collapse enough to really remind me why I love March Madness so much. I mean, what happened? I still don't really understand it, but it was fun.
It's not your job in Carolina Blue to ask questions about what happened to Duke in the last few minutes of that game. It's just your job to enjoy it and enjoy something else we did this weekend. Ben Lindbergh, you are the co-host of Effectively Wild, a baseball podcast, and you were quite excited that the Hang Up and Listen editorial calendar resulted in us doing our Alex Ovechkin record-breaking segment last week, just in time to get under the wire, because he breaks Wayne Gretzky's record on Sunday.
Yeah.
That's that Lindbergh touch.
Only we possess the prescience to foresee sports several days in the future and get our segment in before everyone else's segment, although I did end up writing about it for The Ringer regardless. So if you want some fresh Ovechkin content from me, it's there. But I do feel like we got a head start on our week. Done and dusted, already discussed. We have anticipated the whole conversation. So kudos to us and also, I suppose, Alex Ovechkin.
I suppose so, but he's getting enough of those kudos. By the way, I am very interested in the conspiracy theory that the winning goal hit one of his teammates and that the NHL is hiding camera angles of it. It's a little iffy. I gotta tell you, it's a bit iffy. There's a Washington Capitol very much in the line of that shot, and there's a camera angle that you would think would show it, and seems like there's a graphic in the way on the replay that would hide that from us. I'm just saying.
To be honest, about 30% of goals in hockey, I can't tell who scored, just in general. And people tell me, oh, look at that deflection. And I say, if you say so. So you may be right.
Well, I don't think we're ever going to have a chance to adjudicate this one in public. But before we get into our business, as always, we want to thank our Slate Plus members for making our show possible. Subscribing helps us make the show, of course. It allows you to get the show ad-free, a fantastic perk. And you also get bonus segments. There is good news. We have one of those live right now for Slate Plus members. It is about the business side of this latest year in women's college basketball, this UConn year in women's college hoops, and what to make of how well the sport has capitalized on a wave of recent interest. You can hear that episode right now as long as you are a Slate Plus member. Subscribe by going to Apple Podcasts and clicking try free at the top of our show page, or visit slate.com/hangupplus to get access wherever you listen. Lindsay, we've just spoiled it a little bit, but you were on hand. The UConn Huskies became the gold standard once again in college basketball. They really dominated South Carolina here. I hate to use the Q word because I can't be inside these athletes' heads, but sort of looked like they made South Carolina quit, which was a shocking thing to see in this 82-59 romp over a Dawn Staley coach team. It's a narratively significant win. Gino Auriemma had not won the title since 2016. It allows Paige Beckers to get out of college hoops with a title, and we get to skip the whole how was her legacy affected by not winning one thing that will probably always happen with Caitlin Clark. What was it like in the building to watch this complete dominance unfold for UConn?
Yeah, I mean, let's be honest, the game was a blowout, and all 3 Final Four games I saw in person this weekend were blowouts. But for the national championship game, I think always when a championship is on the line, you don't necessarily, you want the epic game, but you don't need it because there's so much meaning. The ceremony, the moment, the trophy infuses things with enough significance that it's compelling anyways. And listen, UConn fans show up, so do South Carolina fans. So it wasn't just a sold out crowd. It was a very, very engaged crowd with the 2 most prominent fan bases in the sport right now, I believe. And I've been to now 3 of the past 4 Final Fours, and so has Paige Beckers in UConn. And I saw her in Minneapolis after that loss to South Carolina in that national championship game, which was UConn's first time ever losing a title game. You know, I saw her last year, seconds after the devastating loss to Iowa in the semifinals, when there was that, it was like a 2-point loss, that controversial offensive foul call at the end. And, you know, I've seen this weight just grow and grow and grow on her shoulders over the years as she was faced with, like you said, becoming known as the best player at UConn to never win a title. You know, a UConn legend, but you know, this asterisk. And to see that be so defiantly thrown into the trash, to see her get to that mountaintop, to see Azzi Fudd and Sarah Strong at their absolute best, we were watching a machine. And ultimately, South Carolina, I don't think it was quit, but I think there might have been a little bit of acceptance there in the fourth quarter, if that makes any sense. I do think that there's a difference. Like, I think they very much, like, they threw a lot at the wall trying to, you know, Dawn is kind of famous for her in-game adjustments and for pushing the right buttons in game and figuring out different lineups as things are going. But the buttons didn't work. Nothing worked. And they knew that. But it was special. UConn, not bad for women's basketball after all.
Yeah, it was the matchup that you want, just the 2 best teams. And I guess I wish the game had been a bit more competitive, but ultimately, narratively, there's a lot to like about the way that it ended. And it is interesting just because Paige has been such a star, and yet there has been all of this reporting and all of this hand-wringing about what's going on in her head and what does she have to do to lead this team, and can she just be sort of a selfless team player setting other people up, or does she have to be the one who always wants the ball and is going to be taking that shot? And there was a little bit of all of those approaches for her in this tournament. There was the game where she dropped 40 and it was like, oh, okay, here's what she can do, anything. And then there was the game against UCLA where she scored 16 and just had kind of a quiet night. And then in the title game, she scores 17, but it's kind of a blend of both. It wasn't a tour de force the way the 40-point game was, but it was kind of like, this is who she is. And she's not necessarily the person who always has to be pushing herself to take the shot, because she's got all these great teammates. And one of her strengths is just being able to set this up. And so it always felt like trying to force her into this box of being sort of the selfish superstar, selfish in a selfless way, just for the betterment of a team, but always being the one who wants the ball and wants to take that shot. It felt like it was kind of forcing her into an archetype that maybe wasn't really who she was, or wasn't the best approach for her or for the team. And not to be too cliched about it, but this championship just felt like a really team approach where everyone was contributing. It was a team effort. And it felt like that was sort of the essence of who she has been or really wants to be. Like that felt like her game.
That's such a beautiful way to put it. And I love just thinking of it as kind of a final I told you so to Gino. She and Gino have such a funny relationship, and their banter, and there's so much love, but sarcasm and bickering is part of the way they communicate said love. And, this felt like, even though she wasn't the most outstanding player of the Final Four, that title went to AZ Fudd, and it could have easily gone to Sarah Strong. I did vote AZ, but every media person I talked to, it could have been a toss-up between those two. And so her shining the spotlight on her teammates, and like you said, kind of doing this in her own terms. A lot of beauty to that. A lot of joy, and let's face it, a lot of relief.
Yeah, the relief point is interesting. 8 years or so, 9 years or so is an eternity for UConn to go championshipless. Gino Auriemma has been there for 40 years now, and that constitutes a veritable dry spell, I would say. For UConn to not get to the top. I don't know that Gino is ever the kind of guy who can feel heat, because he is who he is and he's done what he's done. But do you think that this championship changes anything about the way that he will approach the end of his career? You have to start to wonder when he might outline a succession plan. It's whispered about almost as much as like a Fortune 500 company doing its succession plan and who's going to be the next CEO. You can't imagine that he was going to go out without winning another title. And I'm not saying he's going to do it now, but any thought about if this affects his outlook and how long he'll keep doing this?
Yeah, a couple of things there. First of all, you say you don't know how much like pressure he feels. He felt a lot of pressure to get Paige her title. And I think he spoke in press about, when you look back at, I think the most amazing thing is, like, yes, it has been all these years since UConn won a national championship again, but they never went away in that timeline. I think they missed.
Right, they were still a Final Four.
They missed
regular.
Like one Final Four. Like, it's absurd, right? Like, they've been at the mountaintop. They just haven't been at the mountaintop alone in this era. And that type of dominance is just like, that's almost more impressive to me than if he had just like been winning everything. But he did feel a lot of pressure to get it for Paige. He talked about his coaches all just kind of coming together and being like, we have to, like, this has to happen, basically. And he was really emotional after this win. He said it was one of the most emotional since his first one. Of course, like, wild just to have so many, to like 12 to, okay, how do I rank these? What are the power rankings of like Gino emotions? But he said this one would be pretty high up there, maybe the second most emotional one, because of that drought, because of how much he wanted this for Paige, because of all the injuries and everything. And yeah, with this win, he became the oldest coach on the men's side or the women's side to win a national championship. He's 71. And, he joked a lot about, well, the other coaches were smart enough to hang it up before they got to that age. That's why I'm the oldest. But let's face it, the end is near. I don't know that it's coming immediately. He spoke about how there are a lot of people in his life who wish that after winning those 4 in a row with Stewie, that he had gone out on top then. And I think getting back to the top now, I wouldn't be this is not me reporting anything. This is not me saying he's going to do this. I would just not be shocked if this was it. I think we see a lot of coaches stepping away at this time, a lot of legendary coaches, and he now knows how hard it is to get back there. So he was very open and press about being like, this is a hard job. Getting back here was really hard. I don't feel like I'm done, but I'm cognizant of the fact that that sooner rather than later I will be.
does speak to the value of continuity just as a spectator, which became kind of a big conversation point, especially on the men's bracket in this tournament because of Duke being the outlier, being young, not having a lot of continuity, a lot of new faces and turnover. And that's something that we've seen across college basketball with changes to the transfer portal and not having to sit out a season and changes to player compensation. And then you had Houston beating Duke and people who I think are sort of anti-turnover seizing on that as, oh, this is why you have to keep the team together, because in these big moments you can play together as a team and you know each other's strengths and weaknesses. And who knows whether that had anything to do with it. I think most people probably take the talent over the continuity if you have to choose. But as someone who sometimes has trouble getting into college sports because of the turnover, because it's just hard to have players to hang on to if you're not attached to a particular team, if you're not rooting for the laundry, you see the value of it with UConn and with Paige just going back to the well so many times so that when you're watching this last hurrah, her last chance, her last run at it, you're remembering all these previous runs. You have her relationship with Oriema. You just have all these storylines that you wouldn't have if it's just sort of playing as a freshman and then going straight to the NBA sort of deal, Cooper Flagg style. So I don't know exactly what the happy medium is there, but I do appreciate it when we actually get a chance to get to know these players as people and also as a team.
Yeah, and look, both of these teams that we were able to see make it to the national championship game, their programs have been built through a lot of recruiting. I mean, these are players who have been there for a while. Not that both coaches are willing to go to the portal. Both coaches will go to the portal this season. Like, nobody is above the portal or bigger than the portal, but it's cool to see this wasn't TCU Avengers of the portal super team creation like we see in the NBA. Like, this was more of, the draft and develop version of college basketball, and it is cool to see. And what you do get the benefit of that is seeing these full journeys like Paige's. And those are the journeys we love the most. So, I mean, I left this game and this weekend just really excited and more bullish than ever, I think, on the future of the game, even if, the games themselves weren't compelling at all, which, as we discuss on the show, happens sometimes. Some years are just like that. That's sports.
That is sports. And we will talk about the business piece of this women's basketball season in our bonus episode that is live right now for our Slate Plus subscribers. Up next, we're going to talk about a renaissance in vertical skateboarding with a tremendous guest. We'll be right back. Hiring shouldn't be a hassle or a drain on your budget. Upwork is your one-stop shop to find, hire, and pay top freelance talent, saving you time and keeping costs in check. Companies at every stage turn to Upwork to get things done and find more flexibility in the way they staff key projects and initiatives. Upwork's global marketplace is filled with top talent in IT, web dev, AI, design, admin support, marketing, and more. Posting a job on Upwork is easy. With no cost to join, you can register, browse freelancer profiles, get help drafting a job post, or even book a consultation. From there, you can connect with freelancers and easily hire them. Upwork makes the entire process simpler and more affordable with industry-low fees. Post a job today and hire tomorrow with Upwork. Visit Upwork.com right now and post your job for free. That is Upwork.com to post your job for free and connect with top talent ready to help your business grow. That's UPWORK.com, Upwork.com. As we progress through the season, every fan knows that big wins are hard to come by and tough losses are even harder to accept. But do you know what isn't hard to accept? Discover. Believe it or not, Discover is accepted at 99% of places that take credit cards nationwide. You heard that right. 99%. So make a good call for your wallet and get Discover. Based on the February 2024 Nielsen report. Learn more at discover.com/creditcard. Tony Hawk was one of the sports icons of my childhood. I played Tony Hawk's Pro Skater on my Nintendo 64. I have the most fuzzy memories of watching him complete his 900 with 2.5 vertical spins high above a half pipe. I was 4 when that happened, so I must have become cognizant of it sometime later, but it was extremely cool. There was a great story in the New York Times last week about what happened after that, which is to say, in the world of vertical skateboarding, not a lot. Park-style, lower-to-the-ground skateboarding is still alive and well, don't get me wrong, but vert has really slipped out of our popular culture. Vert is what Hawk got most famous for doing. It's where the 900 happens. It's where you roll up a half pipe and fly up into the air like an acrobat on a board. It's still kind of considered niche, Hawk told the New York Times. That's what's hard for me to accept. There's been a movement afoot lately, with Hawk its most famous proponent, to make vert a more serious part of our sporting scene once again, in a way it really never has been except for when Hawk was in his heyday. This week, on Wednesday, the International Olympic Committee will tell us whether it will include vertical skateboarding in the program for the 2028 Games in Los Angeles. Lindsey Adler wrote that story for the paper of record and has also riffed on the topic on her Substack newsletter, Critical Thinking. Lindsay, thank you for joining us. And do you think vert has a shot?
I think vert has a shot, but Olympic bureaucracy is what it is. But vert is definitely in a better position to have a chance to be in the 2028 Olympics. And I think in some sense, I wonder if, sort of the common sense of this is a Los Angeles Olympics, we should have the most, at least viewer-friendly version of this discipline on display at the epicenter of it. I'm wondering if that will maybe weight it a little bit more heavily in the IOC's considerations.
For people who haven't read the piece, can you explain the rise and fall of vert? And that is not a verticality joke. I just want to know why it was super popular and then became less so.
I mean, that was like a funny thing to actually reckon with, is that like the story or the structure and flow of the story actually kind of reflects the ups and downs in vert. Literally, there's no way to talk about this without making a pun. So it's like the one time, Ben, that I will not make fun of you for making a pun.
Thanks.
But I learned a lot in reporting this story. I didn't realize the history of vert skating and the difficulties with keeping it alive after the 900, because I think we all know that skateboarding sort of went mainstream that year when Tony landed that trick and then released his video game. What I learned through this is that Tony was actually sort of one of the last of a dying cohort of vert skaters. In the 80s, there were all sorts of course, insurance issues with having vert ramps. And so there was a collection of friends who were sticking with this discipline as everything moved, much more heavily to street skating, using the rails and benches as your terrain, as your playground, instead of what became very inaccessible, which was the vert terrain. And so I hadn't realized that when Tony Hawk had landed that, he was 31. He was sort of in this generation that was on its way out. He had been working on this trick for 10 years, finally landed it. I don't know if you guys recall, but you should go back and watch the video of this, because the X Games kind of gave him extra chances and it became a very shared experience at the X Games, which is ostensibly a competition. But all of his friends were standing around atop the ramp and they were like, let's go, let's get this done. So after that, there just wasn't really a wave of people who were younger than Hawk and Bucky Lasik and guys like that who were around to keep vert alive. And there just were not many vert ramps left in the United States or anywhere. Tony Hawk has this incredible vert ramp that, everyone who tries to discipline skates on. He brings everyone in. But a lot of the vert skaters who did sort of survive that post 1999, bubble, they were driving out of state to learn how to do this. They were they were trying their best, but it was a very difficult thing to try to maintain. But the guys like Elliott Sloan and Jimmy Wilkins, they were just so obsessed with Tony Hawk, as I think we all were, that they really committed to it. Elliott Sloan, who's now a 36-year-old vert skater, he moved from New York City to Vista, California at 17 because that was the only way that he could learn to do this. And so for a while, there were just a few guys like Elliott, like Jimmy, who were sort of keeping it alive. And then suddenly, over the last few years, there's just been this huge resurgence. The theory is Instagram, social media has a lot to do with this. I also believe that one of the big changes is that the people who grew up watching Tony Hawk and grew up idolizing Tony Hawk started having children. And so, whereas Tony says, you know, when I was a kid, skateboarding was something that your parents discouraged. Now there's a whole generation of parents who think skateboarding is cool. And so their kids are having, you know, they're taking kids to the skate park. And so now you just have all of these, and it's global now. You have a bunch of like very young children, like legitimately 9 years old, 12 years old, who are landing tricks that it took Tony until his early 30s to land. And then it just gets amplified by social media because these kids see each other doing it. And so they want to start doing it. And so now there's this funny little, very, very young group of passionate vert skaters who probably don't even realize what they're doing is so influenced by Tony Hawk. Tony said the only thing that bothers him about these kids not knowing their history is that sometimes they pronounce the names incorrectly. But for the most part, he's like, get on that board.
You know, when skateboarding first got into the Olympics, I was surprised at what it was, like what the events were. I'm very ignorant on, you know, skateboarding and stuff, but all the technical tricks, you know, in your piece, you talk about how those are kind of harder for the general fan to appreciate, like me, you know, the uneducated amongst us. And I did not have as much fun watching the skateboarding competition at the Olympics as I assumed I would. And so is the thought also that getting vert back into the Olympics, you know, it's more, you know, like what we've seen with snowboarding and things like that, where it will just really, I mean, it looks cool. Like it looks more cool than just, I know that the park skating is hard, but I sometimes just want to see people jump high and do lots of twisty things.
That's really where the origin of my interest in this story began.
Okay.
You know, people kept asking me about skateboarding in the Olympics, and I would say, no, vert is not included. You're going to have to learn something about street skating and what makes a trick hard versus what doesn't, when clearly vert skating is the entertainment version of this discipline. It's just good that skateboarding got into the Olympics, I would say, for its overall sustaining its popularity. But no, nobody wants to watch street skating in the Olympics because nobody understands what it is and why it's so hard. And it is the core of skateboarding, but it's just not, but the Olympics are an entertainment product. And so I really started wondering, like, how could this even happen? Who is making the choice to put street skating in the Olympics instead of vert skateboarding? And that's when I started to learn about its real recession and the factors that led to it not being a serious contender for 2020 or 2024. And it was pretty shocking to me, actually, to learn just what a bad place that vert was in. And that's why Tony has spent all of this time really campaigning, trying to sort of build a field for vert skateboarders in the Olympics. And now I think if they're not there, they're at least pretty close to having a good field.
Lindsay, you mentioned that California, Southern California in particular, is the epicenter, you called it, of vertical skateboarding. And it's very clear that there's some skateboarding culture in Southern California where I live. Everyone saw Barbie and Ken rollerblading in Venice, just a few minutes away from one of the most famous skate parks in the country, where there's a lot of street park style skating happening. I'm curious, because of that geographic centrality that we have, is this seen as a chance for, the good old stars and stripes, the red, white, and blue, to throw something on the Olympic program that we might dominate at? Because I also note that you seem to mention a lot of Americans there when you were talking about the biggest names in vert skateboarding. Is this a patriotic opportunity?
Honestly, 10 years ago, it might have been, but now a lot of the best skateboarders in the world are of any age are in Japan. There's a lot of skateboarders in Brazil. I actually think there's a real chance that if vert skateboarding is in the LA Olympics, the gold medalists are not Americans. But the Olympics, they do tend to understand their host cities and their host countries and the things that are really representative of things that are important to those cultures and indicative of those cultures. So I think if nothing else, it would be really fun for Americans, because there's no doubt in my mind that Tony and his contemporaries, all the guys that we grew up playing as in the video game, would sort of, return, would be sort of I don't want to say mascots, but would really be the avatars for this. But no, I think if you put vert skateboarding in the Olympics, probably a Japanese 13-year-old would win.
One of my dubious but firmly held beliefs in life is that no non-professional skateboarder has ever actually landed a trick. I'm sure it's happened. I just have not witnessed it. This is based on my own anecdotal observations of skateboarders in the wild constantly eating it, which makes me more impressed when I see vert and see some of the tricks that are landed, which, as you have said, are better than ever. And I did a afterball intro on this show a couple months ago about the progression of snowboarding tricks and about how when we were kids, 1080 was impressive, and now they're up to 2340. So if the preteens now are better than Tony Hawk was grown up a couple decades ago, if people are checking back into vert and maybe they very vaguely remember it from their youths, what will they see now that they could not have conceived of previously?
Children, just children. You're going to be watching these kids just absolutely send it. And I've talked about this. I talked about this with Tony. I talked about with the other sort of elder veteran vert guys who kept Tony's legacy alive. There's a few different components here. One is that they've grown up in a world where a 900, where a 1080 is possible. They have sort of achievable benchmarks to try to exceed. So, Tony said that when he was learning how to skate, things like the kickflip had sort of just been invented. And so the infrastructure for learning how to get good at vert and learning what's really impressive and to take it to new levels really helps. But also, I think we all just need to admit that children are insane. Children legitimately don't have the capacity to understand sort of how dangerous what they're doing could be. And so there's just sort of this childlike, all right, I'm just gonna let it rip because the other most fun thing I can do in the world is swing as high as I can and leap off of that. So I think there's a nice confluence of there being a history of vert and achievable benchmarks, and also children just being way less risk averse than someone like a 30-year-old.
Not to be extremely on brand here, but I have to ask, where are the women in this story? And, I know, especially with the Olympics, if you bring in a new sport, it has to, have gender parity at this point, because the IOC really cares about women,
Thank you, IOC.
Yeah, thank you, IOC. But I definitely do think more about men's skating, probably because of Tony Hawk, when I think about vert. So are the women there where they have enough competitors And I know, talk about young, the women, I mean, there was like a 9-year-old in the Olympics. Like, it was just like crazy.
Mm-hmm. It's a really interesting thing. I mean, Arissa True, who I believe is 12 or 13 years old in Australia, just became the first, she's not a woman, became the first female skateboarder.
There we go. That's the word.
To land a 900. And, you know, Tony posted it on his Instagram and was like, we're breaking glass ceilings here. And I'm like, wow, that's a really visceral way to think about breaking a glass ceiling. But that is why you saw such an age differential in park and skating in the Olympics, because it's still hard for me to call it a sport. It's sort of an art, but it is a sport that has been so hostile to girls and women that these organizations that really wanted to get skateboarding into the Olympics had to like make very, very serious efforts to actually build a field of female skateboarders, having, you know, things like competitions and whatnot. And so eventually the female skateboarders you see in the Olympics or in other events will be of normal people age. But right now, men have just had a much longer opportunity to learn how to do it and do it well. And so there's this groundswell of young female skateboarders, and they're influenced by some female skateboarders in their 20s who are very good at being on Instagram, but it's just going to take a long time to catch up. And that really was one of the original issues with getting vert skating into the Olympics, is that there just weren't female participants. So it's something that in skateboarding, I'm not sure that the gatekeeping would have really been unlocked in this way, if not for, you know, sort of the desperate need to build a field to get it into the Olympics. So it's an interesting relationship there. And I'll be interested to see where it goes for girls and women.
Sometimes policy matters, you know, like it can feel inauthentic, but also like that's how that's supposed to work, right? Is to break through barriers that might not have been broken through without a push.
Rare bureaucratic win. Rare bureaucratic win.
You know what? This is so normal for us to be very pro IOC on this show. You know, if there's anything here at Hang Up we can agree on, it's that the IOC is good for women.
Yes, broadcasting live from Switzerland. Here we are.
Also on brand for us is me mentioning video games, which you did first, to be fair, but I am obligated to follow up on that topic. So I fondly remember the days when every year there was a new skateboarding video game that was among the best sellers and best reviewed in the medium. And that was 25 years ago. And maybe they ran it into the ground by just pumping out too many sequels. But I sense signs of a resurgence. Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3 and 4 remake coming out this July. EA's Skate is coming back in some form, it seems, this year. I wonder why you think there was such a decline, just a disappearance of that genre in video games, and whether it's a chicken or the egg thing, whether the popularity of skateboarding or vert drove the popularity of video games or the other way around. And if it's the latter, then how imperative is it to reestablish that genre to create a new generation of people who play the games and then want to actually go get on a board?
I mean, Tony Hawk's Pro Skater changed my life. It introduced me to the subculture. It introduced me to things like punk rock. I have a lot of, you know, stubborn personality traits that I blame on Tony Hawk's Pro Skater. I think for those of us who grew up playing the game, I don't know, maybe we just aged out of it. I don't really know how teenagers play video games now. I don't know where something like a Tony Hawk's Pro Skater fits into sort of the younger generation of gamers. And I don't know how it's going to work as sort of a nostalgia thing, but I think it's just indicative of Tony's nonstop, maniacal, continued effort to keep skateboarding relevant in America. Tony Hawk is still kind of everywhere. He's officially retired, but like, if you're on the right slices of the internet, you can't go a week without seeing Tony Hawk talking about skateboarding. I will also say that in the reporting for this piece, I interviewed who they played as in Pro Skater. A couple of the pros said that they did get the Spider-Man hack, and so they would play as Spider-Man. Obviously, the guys like Elliott Sloan and Jimmy Wilkins played as Tony Hawk. I was a girl, so I played as Alyssa Steamer or Spider-Man. But Bob Burnquist told me a story about playing Tony Hawk's Pro Skater with Tony Hawk, and that Tony was incredibly competitive about it. And I asked Tony, who do you play as? And he was like, I play as me because I already know how to do all of the tricks. And so I have a major advantage because I already know how to be Tony Hawk. And I was like, my guy, you were talking about a video game. But Bob Burnquist also said something interesting, which was that because Tony was the only guy who was motion captured for this game, he had to learn some other people's tricks. So he had to learn some of Bob Burnquist's tricks. He had to learn some of Alyssa Steamer's tricks. And Bob said something funny. He's like, I'm glad it wasn't the other way around. I'm glad I didn't have to learn how to do the 900 for the video game. So it was really fun to ask them, like, who did you play as? And for all of them to be like, Tony felt he had a legitimate competitive advantage playing as himself. And I was like, well, this is just really, on brand for the guy who has kept this alive. So I had a lot of fun with that. For the rest of my life, I'll be asking pretty much everyone who they played as on Tony Hawk's Pro Skater because instead of astrology or a personality test, that's the thing that tells me the most about them very quickly.
Tony is everywhere if you are, as you say, on the right parts of the internet. And by no means would I claim that because I have sort of lost track of him over my life, that everybody has lost track of him. I mean, he's got almost 10 million Instagram followers. Clearly, he still has some cultural currency. But given that I have sort of not forgotten Tony Hawk, he's the first skater you think of, but don't think about him often, don't see him in the media often. Can I just ask, what's he like? Like, what was it like to talk to this guy? I don't think we keep track of him the way we keep track of Michael Jordan or Wayne Gretzky, who's been in the news a lot lately, or pick your baseball legend who never goes away. Just what was he like?
He's interesting. I mean, he's a professional. He's been interviewed a million times. But the passion is just there. There's a quote in the story where I asked, and I'll be honest, I set him up for this. I knew before I asked him this story that he's talking about, loaning his vert ramp to the Olympics, if that's what it takes. And so I asked him, I said, Tony, what would you be willing to do to get vert skating into the Olympics? And basically before my question was out, he was like, I would give them my ramp. I would give them my ramp immediately. I would tell them that, I have the best vert ramp in the world. You have the terrain, do what you want with it. Like there's no cost to you. It can be assembled in a couple hours. Just take my vert ramp. And, it's funny to see that quote in print where he's like, I would give them my vert ramp. I think the word I used was something like feverishly, but I did recently play the audio for a friend. I was like, you need to listen to the way that Tony talks about it. And it was very much like, I would give them my vert ramp immediately. And so there is a real intensity to him. And so if you do see vert skateboarding in the Olympics in 2028 and you see people from around the world, children, girls, ripping these huge tricks, I think it's important for everyone to understand that this is because Tony cannot let it go. And it was cool.
I mean, it's got to be a little cool. Yeah. And you say that you've covered a lot of, you were a Yankees beat writer. I'm sure you've talked to Aaron Judge a million times. I don't know how many baseball stars you've talked to. It's fucking Tony Hawk, right? Like there's a difference.
None of those people decided the course of my life the way Tony Hawk did. And he did for so many people. And it's so nice to have a millennial cohort who, when I run a story about Tony Hawk, everybody wants to text me about Tony Hawk. It's really great. He is the great unifier for sort of people like us, people like me. His video game allowed me into the world of skateboarding as, as an adolescent girl who was never really ridden a skateboard. It made me appreciate the culture. It made me understand this thing that in a lot of ways, both perceived and real, I didn't have access to. And so it's Tony Hawk. There's no one on earth who is cooler than him, even if he's kind of the world's biggest skateboarding dork. It's hard to find someone who compares, because while Gretzky is obviously the greatest in the game, I don't know, maybe now Ovechkin, but no one has really changed the trajectory of an athletic event the way Tony did. He really stands alone there. And I think it's a unique and remarkable thing. And I think it's amazing that he just keeps banging that drum.
Lindsey Adler, you write about this on your Substack newsletter, Critical Thinking. You frequently appear in places like the New York Times, the New Yorker in the same week. Prolific week for you. Thank you for joining us on Hang Up and Listen.
Thank you so much for having me.
Next, we will talk about a tradition unlike any other, gassing up Rory McIlroy to win the Masters.
So here I am, doing everything I can, holding on to what I am, pretending I'm a Superman. I'm trying to keep the ground on my feet. It seems the world's falling down.
This podcast is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Fiscally responsible, financial geniuses, monetary magicians. These are things people say about drivers who switch their car insurance to Progressive and save hundreds. Because Progressive offers discounts for paying in full, owning a home, and more. Plus, you can count on their great customer service to help you when you need it, so your dollar goes a long way. Visit Progressive.com to see if you could save on car insurance. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Potential savings will vary. Not available in all states and situations.
Baller Alonzo Ball for Buzzballs, ready to go cocktails, take 12.
Buzzballs just dropped their biggest blue balls.
Script says Biggie's blue balls, Lonzo. Take 13.
Blue balls just dropped their biggest buzzballs. Ugh.
Let's try a vocal exercise.
Buzzballs, Biggie's, blue balls, buzzballs, Biggie's, blue balls.
Big balls just dropped. Get blue balls this season with Buzzballs.
Please drink responsibly. Buzzballs available in spirit, wine, and malt. 15% alcohol by volume. Buzzballs, LLC, Carrollton, Texas.
Eczema isn't always obvious, but it's real. And so is the relief from Ebglyss. After an initial dosing phase of 16 weeks, about 4 in 10 people taking Ebglyss achieved itch relief and clear or almost clear skin. And most of those people maintain skin that's still more clear at 1 year with monthly dosing.
Ebglyss, lebrikizumab, LBKZ, a 250 milligram per 2 milliliter injection, is a prescription medicine used to treat adults and children 12 years of age and older who weigh at least 88 pounds or 40 kilograms with moderate to severe eczema, also called atopic dermatitis, that is not well controlled with prescription therapies used on the skin or topicals, or who cannot use topical therapies. Ebglyss can be used with or without topical corticosteroids. Don't use if you're allergic to Ebglyss. Allergic reactions can occur that can be severe. Eye problems can occur. Tell your doctor if you have new or worsening eye problems. You should not receive a live vaccine when treated with Ebglyss. Before starting Ebglyss, tell your doctor if you have a parasitic infection.
Searching for real relief? Ask your doctor about Ebglyss and visit ebglyss.lilly.com or call 1-800-LILY-RX or 1-800-545-5979.
Rory McIlroy has a lot of constituencies rooting for him. There are the people in his native Northern Ireland and all around Europe who have followed his career since he was just a wee lad. There are people who just like to watch a great player who's been a celebrity for a long time and hits the ball farther than just about anyone. There are people who think that Rory is the closest thing to a decent human being on any professional golf tour, someone who has occasionally, and I do mean occasionally and not currently, taken what passes in the golf world for a moral stand on something. And then there are people who just want to watch Rory win a major, something he did 4 times by 2014 when he was 25 years old, but has not done since then. His near misses have become legendary, and they seem to only get more torturous every year. The major that he covets the most is certainly this one, the Masters, played this weekend in Augusta, Georgia. He's never won a green jacket. It would complete the career Grand Slam for him if he did. Ben Lindbergh, I'm not going to ask, is the pressure on Rory? Because, yeah. I'm not going to ask, can he win? Because, yeah. So I'm just going to ask something more personal. How long do you think this pursuit can continue of another major, not even necessarily the green jacket, before you will personally lose interest in it? Or will you never?
I think I'm already at the stage where I say, wake me when he does it, or wake me when he's in contention, at least, because this is his 11th attempt at the Masters, at completing the career Grand Slam, and I think his 39th attempt at winning his 5th major after last winning one at the 2014 PGA Championship. So that's enough attempts that at this point, I'm not really doing the Charlie Brown Lucy with the football. I'm just kind of going to wait, until he's in contention and makes a cut and is high on a leaderboard. And then maybe I can get invested and I'll be pleasantly surprised at that point instead of being repeatedly let down. And maybe if we all took that approach and had that attitude, then the pressure would be off and he would play loose and free, and that would be the key. But I don't think that everyone else will be taking that approach.
Boo. I will not be taking that approach. That sounds horrible. I want to live and die with every stroke Rory McIlroy makes. And
it's a lot of dying you've been doing.
It's
for the
a lot
past
of
decade.
dying, but I'm very resilient, Ben. I don't know if you know this about me. No, I like this. This is the type of stuff I love in sports. Like just the super talented guy makes it to the mountaintop and then just can't get there again. Snake bitten. I think he's had 7 top 10s at the Masters since 2014. He's always, it feels like, right there. And this year,
usually,
people are picking him again. And he's playing well. And the story for me, I don't think it's going to get old until it happens. I love it.
So this year, there are a few things that feel a little bit extra for the will it happen question with Rory. Scottie Scheffler is the best player in the world. Nobody disputes this, but he is not entirely in form. For Scottie Scheffler, not entirely in form just means he hasn't won yet this year, and he merely contends every week. He almost won a couple of weeks ago in Houston. So you've got that issue. You've got Rory maybe trying to take the pressure off himself. Some in the golf press have speculated by announcing a very minor injury that caused him not to play a tournament in the lead up to the Masters, maybe trying to make people forget about him a bit. The betting markets are very clear that this is seen as a 2 guys versus the field situation with Scheffler and McIlroy. And I think at some point this probably has to happen just because of the caliber of his golf shots and the physical distance, both literally and figuratively, I suppose, between him and most of the field. I'm not sure it's ever going to happen at Augusta. I think he will win another major, and I even think it's going to happen this year. But I've started to worry that there might just be something in that place that gets him. And he wouldn't be the first player for whom that is the case. I think that I need to lean into the narratively significant intangible parts of golf in order to process what's happened with Rory in majors in the last 10 years, because otherwise I just have no way of making sense of it.
Yeah, I always get frustrated with the, best player never to win a major narrative. And then it's just, why can't this guy get off the hump? And is it a mental block? And everyone obsesses over that and makes it even harder for the person to do it. And I guess once you've won 4, then it can strike again. And now it's just, why can't you win a 5th one? What have you done for me lately? That was more than a decade ago, which, to be fair, is quite a long time for a player of his caliber. I was going to ask you to try to diagnose his ills, but are you saying that you think it is something psychological more so than mechanical, that this is in his head now, or is it just bad luck and things going wrong at the wrong time?
I think at this point it has to be a little bit of everything. Rory had in 2012, which is a really long time ago now, just one of the uglier collapses on Masters Sunday in the history of the tournament. There have been a few of these. You remember the people that do them. Jordan Spieth is a famous example also from the last decade. But the reason why I think that there might just be something about Rory and Augusta is that this is not an athlete who's been shy about kind of opening up his feelings for global consumption over the years. Like, he has been willing to be pretty vulnerable in front of microphones. And he has made clear what it would mean to him to go out there and win this tournament. And he does this not just at the Masters. He did this when the British Open was at his boyhood home course a few years ago. Everyone kind of knew that this was going to be one of the most significant tournaments of Rory McIlroy's career. He talked about it in the lead up to the tournament, and then he came out and turned in one of the worst performances of his career and missed the cut with one of the worst Thursday opening rounds of his entire career. We've seen a few times at Augusta in the last few years where he's just come out and basically knocked himself out on the first day. This happened 2 years ago in 2023. And when Rory McIlroy is out of a golf tournament on the first day, it tends to mean that he just wasn't locked in. His process just wasn't there. He didn't have himself completely ready to play. I think he will this time around. And I expect that at least up until Saturday, you should see him in the hunt just because of the form that he's been in lately. He's playing really well. And since the turn of the calendar, he has won twice. He has not finished worse than a tie for 17th in any tournament. And so if it were to happen again where he just knocked himself out on Thursday, I think I would say I've seen enough. There's just something going on here that you really can't surmount. For now, I think there is something going on here, but I think he can conquer it. And I hope that he does. It would be a great story.
This is what I love about golf is just that the trauma, the mental trauma of it, that is put onto a player, like the solo experience, in team sports, when you're trying to do something you've always wanted, like there are still places to hide, right? Like Paige Beckers did not have to win this Final Four on her own. She didn't have to carry that weight solo, even though she was very much the driver of that narrative and the, star of that fairy tale. And I just think it's why I joke about how compelling this is to me, is just because we know he has the game to do it, There's no doubt about that. There's no doubt that he can and should win the Masters and win more majors elsewhere. It's just, is he going to put it together mentally? And it's probably disturbing how much I enjoy it.
We're going to see. It's fun to watch someone in a fishbowl.
Well, since the Lindsay in the last segment, Lindsay with an E, not with an A, shot down our attempt to find some source of national pride in vert, perhaps we could find it in golf and in the Masters, because the Americans are on quite a run here. And so if that comes at the expense of Rory McIlroy, then maybe we can feel good about our country in some small way, or at least a countryman, because it's been 7 straight majors won by Americans, which is the longest stretch since the 70s. Last year, all 4 of the major champions were from the U.S. First time that has happened since 1982. So if Scheffler or someone else from the field makes it a bad week for Rory again, then perhaps we could find some faltering national pride in here. We could take some solace and find some American exceptionalism here.
Just what I need in my life, Ben.
Yeah.
This would be very tough for the membership at Augusta National, which is full of a bunch of people who I think are probably feeling a little bit of anger at their boy right now for what he has done to their stock portfolios in the last week or two. I think they need a nice red-blooded American victory, the Green Jackets do, in order to feel good about themselves. And I know we'll all be rooting for them in that pursuit.
And we'll be rooting for them. And the best tradition I am looking forward to is my Masters nap. That is what we really are gonna,
Yes, good point. Yeah. Also, Masters Monday, visors are legal in the northern states above the Mason-Dixon line for the next 2 weeks.
Oh, I did not know.
The visor subcommittee of the American Fashion Committee has said that you can wear visors north of the Mason-Dixon line for the next couple of weeks if you'd like.
That's terrible. That's terrible news.
We will accessorize accordingly.
That is all for this episode. We also have a special bonus show in the podcast feeds right now for our treasured Slate Plus subscribers. It's about the business side of women's college hoops this year. To hear it, you can subscribe to Slate Plus on Apple Podcasts by clicking Try Free at the top of our show page, or visit slate.com/hangup plus to get access wherever you listen. The episode is available right now, and we will see you over there. Our show notes are at slate.com/hangup, and you can email us at hangup@slate.com. And don't forget to follow the show and rate and review us on Apple Podcasts. Our producer is Kevin Bendis, who did not taunt me too much when his New York Yankees were beating up on my Pittsburgh Pirates a couple days in a row this weekend. Thank you, Kevin. For Ben Lindbergh and Lindsay Gibbs, I am Alex Kirshner. I urge you to remember Zelma Beatty, and thank you for listening.